In 1942, Japan ruled the Pacific, its admiralty viewing the US Navy's modest carriers as laughable relics, oblivious to the storm brewing across the ocean. They dismissed America as just a nation of merchants, not understanding the relentless spirit of innovation and resilience being forged in hidden shipyards. These shipyards were crafting a game changer, the Essex-Class carriers. Massive, efficient, and produced at an unprecedented rate, they would soon turn the tide of naval warfare, reshaping the very landscape of power at sea. As tensions simmered in the Pacific, an audacious plan was set in motion. Japan, harnessing its naval prowess, launched the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. When the first bombs dropped, the world was forced to reckon with the staggering might of a carrier force unparalleled at the time. The Kido Butai, Japan's formidable strike grouping composed of 6 fleet carriers, soared through the skies, unleashing a wave of destruction that would echo far beyond the Hawaiian Islands. Imagine the scene, the sun rising over Pearl Harbor, boats gently bobbing in the water, a typical day until the roar of aircraft engines ruptured the calm. In those critical moments, Japan not only unleashed fire, but also instilled fear, striking US bases and crippling operations. Their aircraft didn't just sink ships, they altered the fabric of naval warfare, making every clash a testament to their dominance. To the Japanese Empire, this was just the beginning. Confidence surged through their ranks as they perceived the American carriers, like the USS Lexington and the USS Yorktown, as mere relics, referred to derisively in intelligence reports as floating toys. This mindset epitomized the underestimation that fueled their ambitions. The carriers of the Imperial Navy weren't just vessels, they were symbols of power, hinting at a Pacific destined to remain under their control for decades. For the everyday American, this was not merely a battle of ships and planes, it was a personal affront. Families back home listened anxiously, their hearts heavy with it. Could the unthinkable happen to their loved ones overseas? As the news filtered in, it became painfully clear that what they once viewed as an ocean of safety had turned into a theater of war, a place where the adversary's audacity would soon be felt across the globe. In this context, the mockery of Japan's early dominance becomes more than just a military assessment. It's a stark reminder of the unpreparedness that plagued a nation caught off guard, and the subsequent struggle that would ensue, transforming the Pacific into a battleground that none could have anticipated. The Navy had to recover quickly, and soon the winds of change would signal a different story. As the smoke cleared over Pearl Harbor, Japan reveled in its victory, unaware that it had ignited a fire under the American spirit. While the islands celebrated, American shipyards began their monumental transformation. Across the coasts, from the bustling ports in California to the historic docks of Virginia, workers poured into their stations, a surge of urgency and purpose driving them forward. Imagine the initial silence that hung in the air, quickly morphing into the clanging of steel and the humming of machinery. The atmosphere was electric, a palpable sense of duty infusing every worker. These shipbuilders knew they weren't just constructing vessels, they were crafting the very backbone of America's response. Each stroke of the hammer and turn of the wrench was a testament to resilience in the face of adversity. Amidst this fervent activity, the Navy's Bureau of Ships unveiled its audacious plan, the Essex-Class aircraft carrier. This vessel wasn't merely an upgrade, it was a game-changer. Picture a ship larger than most city blocks, designed to harbor nearly 100 planes. The Essex-Class would rise from the water like a fortress, equipped with impressive speed and unmatched firepower. But here's the kicker. The vision didn't stop with one ship. The ambition surged to build 24 of these floating cities, an industrial warfare strategy that would shift the tide of naval combat. Each carrier served not only as a military asset, but as a bustling environment, complete with kitchens, living quarters, and command centers, essentially a mobile community at sea. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the rhythm of production grew fiercer. Each hull that slid into the water symbolized more than just steel and machinery. It represented hope, unity, and a determination to protect the homeland. Workers took pride in their contribution, knowing full well that the fate of nations rested on their shoulders. They were not just shipbuilders, they were the silent sentinels of America's resolve, turning the tide from a defensive posture to a supreme call to arms. In this sea of steel and sweat, the Essex-Class carriers would soon sail into history, redefining naval warfare and embodying the American spirit in the fight for freedom. The Essex-Class carriers stand as a testament to what can be achieved when engineering meets purpose. Imagine a vessel measuring 872 feet long, equivalent to 3 football fields parked end to end and weighing in at a staggering 27,000 tons. This isn't just a boat floating in the ocean, it's a floating fortress, meticulously crafted for speed and survival. Picture the lives of hundreds of sailors and aviators relying on its formidable design, and you'll quickly grasp the Essex-Class's importance during World War II. What sets the Essex-Class apart is its innovative armoured flight deck, a feature that provided a crucial layer of protection from enemy attacks. This wasn't just an aesthetic enhancement, this was a defensive measure, ensuring that the flight operations continued even under fire. This resiliency meant that while other vessels were taking hits and sustaining devastating damage, the Essex-Class could keep launching and recovering aircraft, maintaining a relentless operational tempo. The heart of this class's design lies in its powerful catapults. These weren't your average launch systems, they were engineering marvels that allowed planes to be deployed with impressive speed and efficiency. Imagine being a pilot, positioned on a deck, bustling with activity and adrenaline, waiting for the unmistakable roar of the catapult as it propelled your aircraft into the skies. For those pilots, the Essex-Class carrier wasn't merely a means to an end, it was an extension of their courage, their ambitions, and the critical war efforts. Distinct from Japan's carriers, which faced challenges in sustaining flight operations around the clock, the Essex-Class was designed with redundancy in mind. This means that if one system faltered, others were ready to pick up the slack. This adaptability not only saved countless missions, but also ensured the safety and morale of the crew. It's as if the designers had anticipated not just the challenges of battle, but the spirit of the sailors who would call this steel behemoth home. Think about those busy hours, the adrenaline-filled launches and the tense recoveries in the midst of chaos where precision was key. Each Essex-Class carrier was like an airborne factory of destruction, churning out sorties and wreaking havoc on enemy positions. With every mission, it transformed the essence of air warfare, bringing the fight to the enemy in ways that were previously unfathomable. It was a floating city with everything from machine shops to mess halls, creating a unique atmosphere where camaraderie and resilience flourished. This ship wasn't simply built to float and serve, it was forged in steel with the sole purpose of surviving and thriving in the heart of the conflict. Each Essex-Class carrier is a chapter in the story of naval aviation, a fierce embodiment of human ingenuity and spirit. As we dive deeper into the experiences and missions aboard these remarkable vessels, remember that their legacy continues to inspire pride and respect for those who sailed in them. Each launch, each recovery was not just a statistic, it was a life determined to honor the collective resolve of the nation. And that's what makes the Essex-Class truly remarkable. The USS Essex, a name that quickly etched itself into the annals of naval history, epitomized the might and determination of a nation emerging from the shadows of defeat. Launched in 1942, this remarkable aircraft carrier joined the fleet at a time when America stood at a critical crossroads. The war was escalating, and the pressing need for new carriers was palpable. The USS Essex wasn't just another ship, it was a beacon of hope, a lifeline for a nation poised to reclaim its strength in the Pacific theater. Within mere weeks of its commissioning, the Essex was thrust into the heart of the conflict. Picture the scene: the roar of engines, the frantic pace of flight crews, and the electrifying atmosphere as planes darted from the deck into the azure sky. What made the Essex remarkable wasn't just its size or capabilities, but rather how it transformed the dynamics of warfare. As it launched strikes across the Pacific, both allies and adversaries were left in awe. Imagine being a Japanese commander during those early months. Trained veterans, accustomed to dominating the skies, suddenly found themselves facing an unyielding wall of American air power. The speed of the Essex's flight operations was astonishing, its ability to launch wave after wave of aircraft almost surreal. Suddenly, those once familiar tactics that had given Japan the upper hand felt insufficient against this relentless barrage. The Essex didn't just bring quantity, it brought a new level of strategy to carrier warfare. For the first time, veteran pilots faced the unsettling realization that their adversary never seemed to run out of planes. As pilots launched from the Essex's deck, they felt a surge of empowerment that was deeply personal. Each mission wasn't just about duty, but about forging their identities within a story much larger than themselves. They were part of something transformative, flying not just to complete missions, but to turn the tide of an entire war. Each takeoff echoed the hopes of families back home who prayed for their safe return. Each aircraft that roared into the sky was a testament to the resilience and spirit of a country rallying together in the face of adversity. The USS Essex didn't just enter the war, it reshaped its very landscape. It became a cornerstone of American naval aviation, proving that with determination and innovation, the tides of war could indeed turn. As we delve deeper into its impact, we'll uncover how the Essex would play a pivotal role in key battles, laying the groundwork for a triumph that once seemed distant. As the war raged on in the Pacific, the contrast between American and Japanese shipbuilding capabilities became glaringly apparent. While Japan grappled with the staggering losses of its fleet, the United States was transforming its shipyards into bustling factories, churning out aircraft carriers at an astonishing pace. This was no mere feat of engineering. It was a testament to the American spirit and determination. Imagine the scene in shipyards across Newport News, Brooklyn, and Norfolk. The air was thick with the smell of metal and paint, punctuated by the rhythmic sounds of hammers striking steel. Workers, some barely out of their teens, clocked in day after day, fueled by the belief that their labor would help turn the tide of the war. Often, they didn't just clock in for 8-hour shifts, they worked around the clock, driven by a sense of urgency and purpose. Each Essex-Class carrier that was launched wasn't just a vessel, it was a floating symbol of hope for a nation yearning for victory. Now consider this: by the end of World War II, the United States had completed an impressive 24 Essex-Class carriers. This wasn't just the largest fleet at that time, it was the most powerful carrier fleet ever assembled in naval history. In stark contrast, Japan managed to build only 6 carriers within that same time frame. This disparity in production wasn't merely a statistic, it represented a strategic advantage that the US could harness in the battles that lay ahead. You could feel the pride rippling through the American workforce as these mighty ships slid into the water, one after another, every few weeks. Each launch was celebrated as a triumph, not just for the men and women who built them, but for the entire country rallying behind the war effort. Picture the jubilant faces of workers, the joy radiating from them as they watched their hard work take to the seas, vessels that would soon become the backbone of naval air power. The Essex-Class carriers were revolutionizing naval warfare, allowing for increased air support and a greater ability to project power across the vast Pacific. These ships didn't just change how the US Navy would engage the enemy, they changed the very nature of warfare as a whole. In a world where every moment counted, the United States was not just keeping pace, but accelerating beyond its adversaries. In those shipyards, a new narrative was being woven. one where American ingenuity, resilience, and a relentless work ethic were transforming the tides of war. The figures clearly illustrated this. Every Essex-class carrier served as a testament to a collective effort, each one a brick in the fortress of freedom and determination that the US was building against tyranny. The stakes were high, but the American spirit was higher, paving the way for victory, one carrier at a time. As June 19, 1944 dawned, the skies over the Philippine Sea became the stage for one of the most significant turning points in naval aviation history. This was the day that saw the Essex-class aircraft carriers showcase their undeniable superiority in what would later be referred to as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Picture for a moment the atmosphere aboard one of these massive carriers. Sailors bustling around, pilots preparing for takeoff, engines roaring to life. Each deck motion was a carefully timed ballet, choreographed like a well-rehearsed performance. The stakes, however, were anything but routine. With the Pacific theater escalating in intensity, the clash between the Imperial Japanese Navy and the United States Navy had reached a critical juncture. At dawn on that fateful day, the Essex carriers, with their fighter wings primed and ready, launched a massive offensive. Imagine the pride that swelled in the hearts of American pilots, many of whom had come up through the ranks, learning their craft in the face of great adversity. They were fueled not just by their training, but by a fierce determination to protect their homeland and assert their place in the skies. As the dawn broke, an onslaught began. Within hours, American pilots would destroy over 600 Japanese aircraft in a single day, a staggering number that would reshape the aerial landscape of the war. The sheer scale of success was unprecedented. It must have felt surreal for those pilots as they engaged in combat, their confidence soaring with each confirmed kill. For many, it wasn't just about tactics or training, it was personal. They fought not only for victory, but for their comrades, for those who had fallen before them, and for the families who awaited them back home. On the other side, the atmosphere in Tokyo was far from victorious. The once boastful laughter had gone silent, replaced by a heavy weight of realization. Japan's aerial capabilities had drastically diminished, and the vacuum left in the sky was a stark reminder of a hard truth. The tide was turning. The war in the Pacific, which had once seemed daunting, now exposed the fragility of Japan's position. American pilots returned to their carriers, not just as warriors, but as harbingers of change. Each launch and recovery sequence unfolded with an almost mechanized efficiency, flawlessly executed missions that appeared as though planned months in advance. The Essex-class carriers had transformed naval warfare, proving the critical role of air power in modern combat. In the face of such overwhelming odds, they emerged not simply as ships, but as symbols of resilience and power. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was a defining moment, echoing through the remaining years of World War II. It was a testament to American ingenuity, tenacity, and a shift in the balance of power in the Pacific. This day would go down in history not only as a victory of tactics and technology, but as a deeply human story of bravery, sacrifice, and hope. The resilience of the Essex-class carriers is nothing short of legendary, especially when you consider the stark contrast to their Japanese counterparts. Picture this: a single hit with a torpedo or bomb could spell doom for a Japanese carrier, with flames and smoke billowing into the air, marking the end of a naval operation in the blink of an eye. But then there were the Essex-class carriers. They were built not just to glide through the waters, but to withstand the very storms of battle itself. Imagine standing on the deck of the USS Franklin as it plowed through a storm of enemy fire. You're surrounded by your fellow sailors, each one trained to fight not only the enemy, but also the chaos that can ensue from a single explosion. The Franklin, affectionately dubbed the Fateful Lady, was hit by a kamikaze in March 1945. It suffered catastrophic damage, with explosions tearing through its hull and wreaking havoc on its crew. Yet amidst that harrowing chaos, the sailors didn't give up. They deployed advanced damage control systems, manning fire hoses, and working to combat flames fiercely consuming their ship. Fast forward to the USS Bunker Hill, another example of engineering prowess and sheer willpower. In May 1945, Bunker Hill was struck by two kamikaze planes. It experienced devastation that could have easily sunk lesser ships. However, the meticulously trained crew rallied. They fought back against the raging inferno, utilizing double hangar decks to quickly reload and launch aircraft, demonstrating that preparation was key. This wasn't merely about steel and rivets, it was about the spirit of innovation that infused every corner of the Essex-Class design, resulting in ships that were constructed to endure. The combination of their advanced damage control systems and double hangar decks meant they had a significantly higher probability of surviving hits. Instead of accepting defeat when under attack, these vessels had been imbued with the determination and capability to continue the fight. Think about this. During the height of the Pacific War, America wasn't just constructing ships. They were crafting lifelines, floating fortresses that could shake off devastating blows. Men trained rigorously for scenarios that tested their limits, ensuring that when real threats emerged, they were ready to respond. They understood the stakes. They staked their lives on those ships, refusing to succumb to the ravages of war. Back at port after such harrowing encounters, the Franklin and Bunker Hill didn't merely represent battleships, but a triumph of human ingenuity and the relentless drive to survive. Here were vessels that not only weathered the storm, but returned to port as symbols of resilience and tenacity. They became a shining example of America's ability not just to build ships, but to create a naval culture focused on perseverance and innovation, a truth forged through fire and sacrifice. In essence, these carriers were more than just naval assets. They embodied the spirit of a nation that refused to back down. Whether it was through the quick thinking of their crews or the robust design of their hulls, they became legends at sea, proving that sometimes it's not just the might of a ship that counts, but rather the heart that drives it. As we dive into this era of intense aerial warfare, it's essential to recognize that the Essex-class aircraft carriers transformed not just the strategy of naval aviation, but also the sheer scale and rhythm at which it operated. The introduction of these heavy-hitting giants wasn't just about having more planes. It was a revolution in how the US Navy approached combat. Picture it. Instead of the tactical single strikes that characterized earlier engagements, these floating airfields were now launching coordinated waves of aircraft, morning, noon, and night. Imagine the atmosphere on the carrier deck, a flurry of activity where every crew member has a critical role to play. It was a scene steeped in urgency and teamwork. With decks bustling and adrenaline surging, planes were rearmed and refueled in a matter of minutes. It was like watching a well-oiled machine, one with its own heartbeat. Each plane that roared off the deck represented not just a pilot's hopes and dreams, but a relentless strategy of attrition against an enemy that found itself increasingly weary and outmatched. For the Japanese pilots, this was a brutal awakening. They had been accustomed to a different tempo, one dictated by the limits of their own resources and the fatigue that set in as their squads dwindled. Now they were faced with a seemingly endless barrage of American aircraft, a sight that must have been both awe-inspiring and utterly demoralizing. How could they keep launching planes like this? They must have wondered, overwhelmed by the relentless might of an enemy who seemed not just organized, but seemingly tireless. As these pilots flew into the skies, they weren't just engaging in dogfights, they were confronting an entire assembly line of aerial warfare. Each wave was a reminder that they were outnumbered and outpaced. The air over the Pacific had transformed into a battleground where the US Navy's approach was more akin to a factory operating at full capacity rather than a battlefield defined by individual heroics. What did this mean for the men flying these planes? Imagine the courage needed to push through wave after wave of combat with the knowledge that reinforcements were always on the way, that fresh pilots were gearing up and ready to take their place. For the American troops, this relentless rhythm fostered a sense of invincibility, a feeling that they could keep fighting, keep pushing forward, no matter the cost, a sentiment that inevitably eroded their enemy's resolve. The Essex-Class carriers were more than just ships. They became symbols of American endurance and innovation. The overwhelming power projected by this new strategy resonated deeply, shaping the morale on both sides. As the US Navy kept planes flowing from these decks day after day, the Pacific theater turned into a theater of attrition, where the relentless rhythm of combat continually wore down the enemy. So, when we reflect on this period, it's crucial to understand that these weren't just numbers or statistics. They were lives, stories, and the unified effort of countless individuals who poured their hearts into each mission. The skies were indeed endless, filled with the roar of engines and the hopes and dreams of men destined to fight for their country. They bore witness to an era where strategy met the vast canvas of the sky, painting a picture of warfare that would redefine naval aviation forever. Amid the territorial sweep of the Pacific in 1945, a profound transformation was taking place within the Imperial Japanese Navy. The once dominant maritime force, which had boldly expanded its reach across vast oceans, was now reeling from a tactical nightmare. The Essex-Class aircraft carriers had become the backbone of the American naval strategy, each one a formidable floating fortress equipped with dozens of planes ready to launch a barrage at a moment's notice. Picture it, a fleet of these massive carriers, often compared to cities on water, sailing confidently as they loomed over the horizon, a symbol of US technological superiority. The turning point for Japan came at Leyte Gulf, a pivotal encounter that marked the devastating end of their carrier strike capability. There, in the chaos of battle, their last remaining aircraft carriers were sunk, and with them, the fighting spirit of their air groups was vaporized. Imagine the crew on board, facing their final stand with a mix of determination and despair. You could hear the thunder of their engines, the cries of their pilots, but ultimately, it wasn't enough. As the smoke cleared and the tides shifted, the realization dawned: the mighty Imperial Navy was on the brink of collapse. Faced with impending defeat, Japan's leadership made a desperate decision. They resorted to kamikaze tactics. This shift was not just a tactical maneuver, it was a sign of desperation stamped with a grim resolve. Japanese pilots, willingly or under immense pressure, took to the skies in suicide missions, aiming for the very heart of the enemy fleet. Each flight was a final surrender of hope, a tragic acknowledgement that their traditional methods of warfare had failed spectacularly. The idea of such sacrifice, throwing away lives with the aim to inflict damage, sends shivers down the spine. It's difficult for us to grasp fully, but that profound dedication reflected not merely a willingness to die, but an unbearable burden to protect their homeland at all costs. But while these brave young men flew their final missions, the Essex-Class carriers continued to adapt and evolve, becoming the hammer that would shatter Japan's naval ambitions. Armed with advanced aircraft and wartime innovations, they unleashed a level of firepower that Japan had not anticipated. Each sortie was a relentless onslaught, a series of strikes that whittled away at the last vestiges of Japanese naval strength. Picture those days in 1945, the sun rising over the waves, the carriers launching their planes, and all you could hear was the sound of engines roaring to life, cutting through the air like a testament to American resilience. As the kamikaze efforts unfolded, it became clear that Japan's once mighty navy was no match for the force unleashed from these Essex-Class carriers. The dizzying realization that their empire could be overwhelmed was sinking in, figuratively and literally, with each loss at sea. It was an unraveling of everything they had fought for, the steady disintegration of an imperial dream, crushed under the weight of relentless American firepower. By the end of the conflict, with the skies filled by the thunder of aircraft and the seas stained by the scars of battle, the Empire faced a moment of stark truth. They had not just lost a series of battles, they had lost their identity as a maritime power. As each ship sank beneath the waves, it wasn't just metal and machinery being lost, but a profound chapter in the annals of history, a poignant reminder of humanity's capacity for both valor and tragedy in the face of overwhelming odds. The Essex-Class carriers didn't just fade into history, they stood the test of time, evolving with every challenge. Rebuilt and modernized, they saw action again in Korea and Vietnam, where their decks became launch pads for the first jet fighters and helicopters. Imagine being aboard, witnessing history as these giants also aided in space recovery missions. While Japanese carriers faded after 1945, the Essex fleet sailed on, embodying resilience and strength, truly the backbone of American power throughout the 20th century. Laughter echoed across Japan, mocking America's so-called toy ships, yet that chuckle quickly faded, swallowed by the thunderous roar of 2,000 American aircraft soaring over the Pacific. The Essex-class carriers didn't just lead us to victory, they revolutionized war itself. Crafted by dedicated workers, each ship was a testament to resilience, transforming assembly lines into engines of triumph while an empire faded into the depths.